Hello, my name is Simone Randall, and I'll be talking about the Pertussis Toxin, or PT/PTX. First, I'll be talking about what the Pertussis Toxin is, where it comes from, the chemical structure of PT, the mechanism it uses, and then finally, I'll be talking about pertussis, which is a disease. Pertussis toxin is an exotoxin, and as we know, exotoxins are proteins secreted from pathogenic bacteria, usually from gram-positive bacteria, but Bordetella pertussis is a gram-negative bacteria. This is a gram-staining image from sciencephoto.com. It's an aerobic encapsulated Coccobacillus bacterium, and it's motile and expresses a flagellum-like structure. It's known to colonize the human respiratory tract, which ultimately leads to whooping cough. So this is the chemical structure of pertussis toxin. It's a protein, as I mentioned before. It's a hexamer, which means that it's made out of 6 different subunits. Actually, subunit 4 is repeated, so it's made out of 5 different subunits, but it's 6 total. And it's a AB5 exotoxin, which basically means that there's 2 domains, an A domain and a B domain. And the A domain is the subunit 1, and the B domain is composed of the rest of the subunits. The domain A is responsible for the catalytic activity of the toxin, while the domain B is responsible for binding to the receptors of the cell membrane. So let's take a look at the mechanism that it uses. So I know the text here is tiny, so I'll be going through it. First, the exotoxin is released by B. pertussis in latent form. It will bind to the receptors of the target cells using these 2 dimers of the domain B. And then the cell will actually take it up in an endosome, where then it will travel through the retrograde transport pathway to the Golgi, then to the ER. And then when it reaches the ER, the domain B will bind to ATP, and this results in a conformational change where domain A will dissociate and then be put in an exosome and put in a pathway towards the cell membrane. This is where it becomes activated. Once it's activated, it will actually ADP ribosylate the G protein, which just means that it's going to transfer an ADP ribosylase to the G protein, specifically to the alpha subunit. This prevents G proteins to interact with G protein coupled receptors, which are responsible for intracellular communications. And this blocking of the interaction makes G protein coupled receptors unable to inhibit adenylate cyclase activity, which in turn causes CAMP to build up inside of the cells. This leads to a lot of systematic effects. One of those systematic effects includes increasing the release of insulin, which causes hypoglycemia, along with a lot of other impacts to the biological signaling of the cell. We know that PT also blocks inflammatory responses to the cells, so it is a strong contributor to the virulence of B. pertussis because it inhibits phagocytosis activity and it inhibits neutrophil activity, so it allows B. pertussis to colonize in our respiratory tract, which then leads to whooping cough or pertussis, which is an acute respiratory disease. It's really contagious, and it spreads from bacteria bearing droplets of an infected individual. There's 3 stages of the disease: the catarrhal, the paroxysmal, and the convalescent stage. The first stage, the catarrhal stage, is you get very mild or no symptoms at all, but this is a stage where you're most contagious and you could transmit the disease to somebody else. And then it's the proximal stage, which could last for up to 4 to 5 weeks. And this is the stage with the characterized episodes of like severe coughing, and after you cough, you inhale very deeply, and there's a distinctive like whooping sound, which is why it's nicknamed the whooping cough. And then in the convalescent stage, the cough is receding, and then the symptoms start to improve. Um, Pertussis, or the whooping cough disease, has diminished greatly due to the DPT vaccine. The DPT vaccine is the diphtheria pertussis tetanus vaccine. Um, it's it's very important that we probably all got the DPT vaccines when we were younger, but we start to lose immunity as we get older. So infants that haven't been vaccinated, and young adults whose immunity is wearing off from the vaccine, are the most susceptible to this disease. However, it's very severe in infants, and 1 in 200 children will die every year from this disease. And I will end in an interesting thing that I learned of pertussis. The PT toxin it's still unknown why exactly it leads to the whooping cough and the pertussis disease, but we do know that people who have Bordella pertussis colonized in their lungs, they do have the whooping cough disease. However, there has been 2 instances, one in 2007 in France and one in 2011 in New York, where a 3-month infant and an 11-month infant had whooping cough symptoms and the whooping cough disease, but they tested negative for the PT toxin. So whether the PT toxin directly leads to whooping cough is still up for debate, and I'll finish the presentation on that. Thank you. Also, these are my references that I used, and thank you.